Then we'll just read the translation. Kvachit pibayantam pibati madiram madabhi valaha ashnandyam kvachit ashnati jakshatyam sahajakshiti kvachit gayati gayam tam rudatyam rudati kvachit dasyantam hasati jalpatyam anujalpati kvachit davati dhavhantyam tishtantyam anutishtati anushete shayanayam anpashte kvachit asatim kvachit trinoti srinvatyam pasyantyam anupashyati kvachit jigrati jigrantyam sprishyantam sprishati kvachit cha shoshatim jayam anushochati dinavat anuhrishyati hrisyantyam muditam anumodate. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. When the queen drank liquor, King Paranjana also engaged in drinking. When the queen dined, he used to dine with her. And when she chewed, King Paranjana used to chew along with her. When the queen sang, he also sang. Similarly, when the queen cried, he also cried. And when the queen laughed, he also laughed. When the queen talked loosely, he also talked loosely. And when the queen walked, the king walked behind her. When the queen would stand still, the king would also stand still. And when the queen would lie down in bed, he would also follow and lie down with her. When the queen sat, he would also sit. And when the queen heard something, he would follow her to hear the same thing. And when the queen saw something, the king would also look at it. And when the queen smelled something, the king would follow her to smell the same thing. When the queen touched something, the king would also touch it. And when the dear queen was lamenting, the poor king also had to follow her in lamentation. In the same way, when the queen felt enjoyment, he also enjoyed. And when the queen was satisfied, the king also felt satisfaction. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The mind is the place where the self is situated, and the mind is conducted by the intelligence. The living entity situated within the heart follows the intelligence. The intelligence is herein depicted as the queen, and the soul, under mental control, follows the material intelligence, just as the king follows his wife. The conclusion is that material intelligence is the cause of bondage for the living entity. The point is that one has to take to spiritual intelligence to come out of this entanglement. In the life of Maharaj Ambarish, we find that the great Maharaj first engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. In this way, his intelligence became purified. Maharaj Ambarish also used his other senses in the service of the Lord. He engaged his eyes in seeing the deity in the temple, nicely decorated with flowers. He engaged his sense of smell by smelling the flowers, and he engaged his legs by walking to the temple. His hands were engaged in cleansing the temple, and his ears were engaged in hearing about Krishna. His tongue was engaged in two ways, in speaking about Krishna and in tasting prasad offered to the deity. Materialistic persons who are under the full control of material intelligence cannot perform all these activities. They cannot perform all these activities. Thus, consciously or unconsciously, they become entangled by the dictations of material intelligence. This fact is summarized in the following verse. Almost makes me want to go on to the next verse, but I will control my senses and not hog everything. So, Begin to see the pattern here. When she drank, he drank. When she dined, he dined. When she chewed, he chewed. When she sang, he sang. She cried, he cried. She laughed, he laughed. She talked loosely, he also talked loosely. She walked, he walked behind her. She would stand still, he would stand still. She would lie down, he would lie down. When she sat, he would sit. When she heard something, he would hear also. When she saw something, he would also look at it. When she smelled something, he would follow her to smell it. When she touched something, he would touch it. When she was lamenting, the poor king also had to follow her in lamentation. I like that, the poor king, like the poor spirit soul who's under the dictation of the mind and the senses. So that is a lamentable position. When she lamented, he lamented. She enjoyed, he enjoyed, and satisfied, he was. I think the point in this verse, these 4 verses, is well made, graphically speaking, about the king just doing whatever was dictated by the queen. And Prabhupada says that in this case, the queen is analogously representing the material intelligence, and whatever is being dictated is being carried out by the spirit soul. In Bhagavad Gita, we have one very nice verse amongst 700 very nice verses that explains in the 3rd chapter, Indriyani pranyahur indriyabhya param manaha manasas budhir yo budhe paratastu saha. Superior to matter is the senses of the living entity, and superior to those senses is the mind. Manastu para budhir, or indriya param manaha. Superior to the senses is the mind. Manasastu para budhir. Superior to the mind is the intelligence. And yobudhe paratastu saha, that superior to the intelligence is the living entity. So then the point is there, if the living entity is superior to this delineation, this progression of existence, why should he follow the dictates of the mind and the material intelligence? Why should he do that? But he should not do that. Rather, he should follow the dictates of the spiritual intelligence. And the material intelligence and the spiritual intelligence are similar yet different, because the material intelligence is determined to engage one in the process of sense gratification, whereas the spiritual intelligence has this direction, gives this direction to engage in the service of Krishna. So therefore, one should engage himself in such a way as to awaken the spiritual intelligence, and then follow those dictates, rather than follow the dictates of the matter, the senses, the mind, and the material intelligence. So the intelligence is like, there's a fine line there from the intelligence is one of the material elements, according to Krishna's description in Bhagavad Gita. Ahankara iti ame bina prakritirashtadha. That this, the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego are also counted amongst the material elements. So they are not in and of themselves spiritual at all. But then the point is also made by Krishna that the mind can be one's best friend or one's worst enemy, depending upon how it's oriented. So the mind trained to engage one in Krishna service, that is the best friend. And the mind not trained in that way, which means left to its own devices, left to the dictates of the material energy, is one's worst enemy. So would you rather be directed by your best friend or your worst enemy? Your best friend will always tell you, engage in Krishna service. Your worst enemy will tell you, just enjoy this material world. You know, they have this graphic representation even amongst the normal people, that on one shoulder you have this little angel telling you to do all the good things. And on the other shoulder you have this little devil with these little horns, and he's holding a little prod, and he's got some fire there. And he's telling you to do all the bad things. But unfortunately, the conditioned soul, he's ignoring the good self, the angel on this side, and listening to whatever the devil says on that side. As Flip Wilson, one comedian in our childhood, used to say, "The devil made me do it." As if I, the living entity, am not responsible. And we had one boy here with us for a short time who actually claimed that I'm not my mind or my senses or my intelligence, therefore I'm not responsible for any of my actions. Wrong. It's Moses, that's right. So you remember him saying that? Yes, I do too. That was quite hilarious. So, one can take jumbled up pieces here and there of Krishna consciousness and string them together in such a way that one feels he's not responsible for him being in Maya. But whose fault is it that the living entity is in Maya? Is it the demigods? Is it the material energy? Is it the weather? Is it other people? But ultimately, we bear the sole culpability and responsibility for being in our present lamentable condition of being under the influence of the material energy due to our wanton and willful neglect of serving Krishna. Unfortunately, we have done that on purpose. It wasn't just some accident, and I'm not responsible, somebody else's fault. But we have willfully, that's called Krishna Bahirmukha. We have willfully turned our face away. There's Krishna. No. I will not serve Krishna. Why should I do that? Rather, I want to enjoy. That is my mission in the material world. So how can I neglect my responsibilities to my lower self to engage in sense gratification? That would be a crime. And sometimes the parents of devotees, they're thinking that how can you neglect your responsibilities to enjoy this material world? That's just not proper. That's just what we have done with our life, and we fully expect you to do that with your life and not serve Krishna. If you want to do some service, you come to us and we will engage you in your activities according to our desires. Right? We've experienced this. And even if you're not directly serving us, the sense gratifying parents will maintain that it's okay as long as you're enjoying for yourself, it's all right. As long as you're taking care of number one, then okay, that's acceptable. But this going and serving Krishna, well, that is not acceptable. They're thinking that is Maya. If you're serving Krishna, that is bogus. Because we didn't enjoy your own senses and make your life constructed in such a way that you follow in the footsteps of everybody else who's doing that, which includes themselves, the parents. So sometimes we encounter that philosophy, so-called philosophy. It's not really a philosophy. It's more like a raison d'être, which means I live for sense gratification. That's my, that's the meaning, that's the whole essence of existence. That's a French phrase, raison d'être, which means the whole reason, the whole meaning of everything. What is your mission? What is your goal? Why are you here? Why are you doing what you do? And that is, in the words of Prahlad Maharaj, that's called Griha Vrata, that one has taken a vow to enjoy this material world. And that anyone and everyone who says anything different is a rascal, because the real business is Griha Vrata. Natevadu Swarta Gatemi Vishnu, because they don't know. They have no idea that the real goal of life, Gatem Hi Vishnu, is to serve the lotus feet of Krishna. They don't get that. They don't know that. They don't, and they don't want to know it either, by the way. Don't try and tell them. Who are you, my child, to instruct me in the goal of life? I'm the parent. I'm superior to you. You're the child. Your business is to follow my footsteps and to fulfill my desires. Or at least do the same program, fulfill your own desires. But serving God, what is foolishness? What illusion, what madness is that? And so that consciousness is exactly the antithesis of Krishna consciousness. And in Krishna consciousness, everything we do, we're trying to, and we're hoping to, by Krishna's mercy, awaken our spiritual intelligence and follow that path, that dictation to serve Krishna. So when one becomes trained up in the system of bhakti yoga, then that's when the mind is the best friend, because the mind knows, oh no, that is not to be done, this sense gratification. And serving Krishna, that is to be done. And then when the mind becomes trained up, even the mind, one may somehow try to fall into illusion. The mind says, no, wait, you were meant to serve Krishna. Someone may be in Maya in some way, and some little child devotee will remind one to serve Krishna. You ever had that experience? The little child, oh, but mommy, you're supposed to serve Krishna. Don't be in Maya. Like when the little kid says it to you, like, oh boy, I better keep my straighten the ship here and go on the right course. Because even my child knows better, because they're trained from the very beginning of life. Komarara charat pragyo, dharman bhagavatam ihav. One should take to this Krishna consciousness. Komara acharat pragyo. Komara means from a very tender age of childhood. Prahlad Maharaj also instructs that. Because manusham durlabham, that this human form of life is very rare and very valuable, and it should not be squandered or wasted under any circumstance. But from the very beginning of life, one should be engaged in the service of Krishna, and then one's life will be perfect. One will be aligned with the stars. Prahlad Maharaj also speaks about that some people think they're influenced by this planet or that planet, but there's one Krishna Graha, one Krishna planet, and that one should come under the guidance or the influence of the Krishna planet. And then all the other stars and planets can go whichever way they go and do whatever they want. It doesn't matter. And Prabhupada has explained how when one claps his hand in kirtan, then the lines of one's destiny that are engraved from the very beginning of one's life into one's palm, by clapping the hands in kirtan, those lines are changed. The direction or the course of one's life is changed. Of course, some of them seem to still work on some level or another. You can only live so long, and whatever and distress comes your way, and both will come your way, that is already given. And you can't really change that, but what you can change is your destination in life. You can change your destination by going back to Godhead, your destiny. You can change it from your material destiny, and you can supersede that and bypass that with the superior direction of Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada speaks very nicely in this purport about Maharaj Parikshit, who is sort of the bipolar opposite of King Paranjana. Because he's a great devotee, he's not following the dictates of the queen or the material intelligence, which is addicted to sense gratification, but he's following the higher dictation of Krishna consciousness. And those verses I will read from the 9th canto, chapter 4, text 18 through 20. These are the big verses from the 9th canto. Savai mana Krishna padara vindayor vachamsi vaikuntha gunanuvarnani karau harer mandira marjanadishu shrutim chakarachutya satkatodaye Mukundalingalaya darshane drishao tadbritya gatra sparshingha sangamam grihanam cha tatpada saroja saurabhe srimat tulasya rasanam tadarpite padau harer kshetra pada nud sarpane shiro rishikesha padaravandane kamam chadasye natu kama kamyaya Yato tamashloka janashraya ratahi. Maharaj Ambarish always engaged his mind in meditating upon the lotus feet of Krishna. Savaikmana Krishna padara vindaya. His words in describing the glories of the Lord, his hands in cleansing the Lord's temple, and his ears in hearing the words spoken by Krishna or about Krishna. This is Shukadeva Goswami speaking, by the way. Maharaj Ambarish engaged his eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna, Krishna's temples, and Krishna's places like Mathura and Vrindavan. He engaged his sense of touch in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. He engaged his sense of smell in smelling the fragrance of tulsi offered to the Lord. And he engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord's prasad. Maharaj Ambarish engaged his legs in walking to the holy places and temples of the Lord, his head in bowing down before the Lord, and all his desires in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. Indeed, Maharaj Ambarish never desired anything for his own sense gratification. He engaged all his senses in devotional service in various engagements related to the Lord. This is the way to increase attachment for the Lord and be completely free from all material desires. So here that is the perfect description of the perfect devotee. And even though he's a big king, he does not hesitate to engage his body in menial tasks in service to Krishna, like it's mentioned, cleansing the temple of the Lord. He was cleaning the temple also. Not that, he had so many servants. Okay, you clean the temple. No, let me clean the temple. And we're reminded also in the same way of Srimati Rukmini Devi, who, though that she had many servants, she would personally fan Krishna. The servant comes to fan, give me that. She would use the chamra. Give me the chamra. Let me serve Krishna. I am the servant of Krishna too. So although there are many servants around, still personal service to Krishna. Not, oh, let the servants do it. It's time for Krishna's meal. Oh, let the servants take care of all that, darling. Not like that at all. Which is what rich people kind of do. Right? Oh, let the servants do that. I won't lift my finger. So, such is the level of his bhakti, that it is 24/7, 100%, always go, always ready to serve Krishna. And his desires were always directed towards serving Krishna. I really like that. He never desired anything for his own sense gratification. So it's very interesting. There's a verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. By Srila Rupa Goswami. Let's grab it right here. It is. This is a very wonderful verse that explains there are different personalities in relation to the 9 processes of devotional service who exemplify each process. That verse states, Sri Vishnu Shravane Parikshit Abhavad Maya Sakhi Kirtane Pralada Smarane Turangri Bhajane Lakshmi Pritu Pujane Akruras Twabhivandane Kapipatir Dasye Tasakir Arjuna Sarvas Vatma Nivedana Balir Adbhut Krishna Patir Ishampara. Maharaj Parikshit attained the highest perfection, shelter at Lord Krishna's lotus feet, simply by hearing about Lord Vishnu. Shukadev Goswami attained perfection simply by reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaj attained perfection by remembering the Lord. The goddess of fortune attained perfection by massaging the transcendental legs of Mahavishnu. Maharaj Prithu attained perfection by worshiping the deity. And Akrura attained perfection by offering prayers unto the Lord. Vajrangaji, Hanuman, attained perfection by rendering service to Lord Ramachandra. And Arjuna attained perfection simply by being Krishna's friend. Bali Maharaj attained perfection by dedicating everything to the lotus feet of Krishna. That's Atman Nivedanam, surrendering everything. And then Maharaj Parikshit, Maharaj Ambarish, he exemplified all of these things. He did everything in relation to Krishna. So he's like a very special devotee because he does all the 9 processes perfectly. So that's quite classic and very wonderful. So that is from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which Prabhupada has given the study of as the Nectar of Devotion. A very wonderful verse, naming each personality and what was their perfection, what service they are doing. Hearing, chanting, remembering, worshiping, offering prayers, etc. Arjuna being the best friend of Krishna, Sakyam, it's called Sakyam, and then Bali Maharaj, Atman Nivedanam, giving everything to the lotus feet of Krishna. So that's wonderful that Maharaj Ambrish gets like 3 verses just to describe how he's doing everything in his devotional service to Krishna. So it is, Prabhupada explains that one can perform any one of these activities, as the personalities mentioned in that verse by Rupa Goswami, or one can do any one of them, or a combination of them, or do all of them. So that's a very famous verse, Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Padasevanam, spoken by Prahlad. And then sometimes devotees refer to these other processes of devotional service, Scrubbanam Mapanam, for example. And in the case of Parameshwar, cleaning the stoves in the kitchen, scraping them. We got scrubbing them, mopping them, scraping them, painting them, fixing them, driving them. So many ways to serve Krishna. And by engaging the senses, Sarvopadi Vanirmuktam Tat Padatvaina Nirmalam Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanim Bhakti Uchate. By engaging the senses in the service of the master of the senses, Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanim Bhakti Uchate. That is called devotional service. And Sarvopadi Vanirmuktam, giving up our material designations, if we're attached to them, they are an impediment to our serving Krishna. Why is that? Because we're attached to that material designation over and above the fact of our real identity as the servant of Krishna. So, Sarvopadi Vanirmuktam, one has to become, mukta means liberated. Vanirmuktam, Sarva Upadi. Upadi means material designations, which are actually anartha, they're unwanted things, these designations, that we carry around with us like a heavy burden. It's a heavy burden of our conditioning, of our mind and our senses and our material intelligence. And we carry it around as if it were our most prized and valuable possessions in the world. And it impedes us in performance of devotional service as long as we remain attached in that way. But the chanting of the holy names is so not only nice, but powerful, that it dissolves the false ego, the attachment to the material designations. So, therefore, 16 rounds minimum. You have to pour that holy name potion, which is like an acid that eats away our stone-like hearts, penetrates that covering, and then allows the real self, who is the servant of Krishna, the blissful servant of Krishna, to shine forth. The spirit soul is very glorious. Why is the spirit soul glorious? Because he is part and parcel of Krishna, and that is his identity. His reason for existing is to manifest that full potency of devotion of the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani, who is the queen of devotional service. She's the controller of devotional service. Without Radharani, there is no bhakti, there is no devotion to Krishna. That comes under the jurisdiction of Radharani. So by her mercy, then we can engage in devotional service and gradually become unencumbered by the mind and the false ego and the material intelligence, and our attachment to thinking that we are something separate from or independent of Krishna. Because we very much walk around thinking we're separate from and independent of Krishna, don't we? Do we or do we not? Yes, we do. Unfortunately. And that is our disease condition. Therefore, Shukadev speaks in the 10th canto, Nivritattar Shire, Upagi Yamanad, Bhavo Shadach Chota Maro Biramat, Karujama Shloka Gunanuvadat, Pumang Virajeta Apashubha. That who will not the Krishna Katha, Uttama, who will not hear these messages of Krishna, which is the very cure for the disease of our material existence. It's an amazing science, Krishna consciousness. Simply by hearing about Krishna and by chanting Hare Krishna and engaging ourselves in devotional service, then all that troubles us, which is birth, death, old age, disease, lamentation, illusion, ignorance, envy, all that is mitigated. And all your past karma, your slate, like, they say someone has a criminal record as long as your arm. They have just a list of all these things they've done. Well, we all have these long lists, like a mile long, of all these different lifetimes and things we've done. And we're encumbered by that. We're the servant of that. We can't escape it. Just to clear the slate, throw it in the fire, burn it up, start fresh by remembering, hearing, chanting about Krishna. So who do that except for one who is a butcher or one who is killing his own self? That's what Shukadev is saying in that beginning of the 10th canto. So bhava asadi, our disease of material existence, the bhava, there is a cure, the asaudi, the medicine, and that is the chanting about Krishna. So who will not take that medicine? In the beginning of the Bhagavatam, there's in the first canto, first chapter, there's that verse that I forget the Sanskrit, but it says that drink pipata Bhagavatam rasamalayam, drink deep the nectar of Krishna Katha in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. Pipata Bhagavatam rasam alayam mohoraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. And that taste that nectar of Krishna Katha, and then that will satisfy. But just drinking through the ear. But Karana Rasayana Katha. In the third canto, that by taking that nectar of Krishna Katha in the association of devotees, satam prashangam, mama virya samvida, my devotees, Lord Kapila is saying, by associating with them and then taking in that nectar, Karana Rasayana Katha, that Krishna Katha, which Hrit Karna means the heart. So it becomes very pleasing to, and then it enters from the ear, it goes into the heart, and one becomes fully, in the heart one becomes pleased and satisfied. Not only in the ear, but deep within the heart, where the soul is residing, although covered for the most part, in most cases, except for one who is a liberated devotee. But that by that process of pouring that nectar into the ear becomes pleased, and the heart has a very the heart. And then the proof of that is that when one engages in Krishna consciousness, then one's attachment, one's attraction to sense gratification, to enjoying this material world, to turning away from Krishna, that gradually, that whole knot, that hard knot in the heart is loosened. And then one gives up one's attraction to Krishna by tasting that attraction to Krishna. What Bhagavad Gita describes as param drisva nirvartante. One gets a higher taste, and then that lower taste is like, been there, done that. Wow. So that is the proof of our engagement in bhakti. But if we're not engaging nicely in bhakti, then that gratification, it still remains. It is very attractive because we haven't fully embraced Krishna consciousness. But don't despair. Don't give up hope. Keep on chanting. And then gradually, that just like when one has jaundice, then one takes sugar candy. And that sugar, when you take it, if you have jaundice, it's just bitter. It's so bitter. It's oh man, I can't eat that stuff. But it is a cure. And one goes on taking the sugar candy, and then one is cured of the disease. So we have to go on taking, which may seem like poison in the beginning, is nectar in the end. Whereas sense gratification, which seems like nectar in the beginning, it becomes poison in the end. My favorite examples of that is smoking. You're smoking, you in the beginning, oh, I am so cool. I'm smoking. A person 14 years old. I am so cool. Then he's 70 years old. I'm dying of cancer. Smoked all these years. So it seemed like it was so cool. And then now you spend all this money, your breath stinks, you got stains on your teeth and your fingers, and your diet is killing you. It's not so much nectar now, it's poison. Seemed like nectar in the beginning. It turned out that it was poison. So to give up sense gratification and embrace Krishna consciousness, it may seem like, oh man, that's heavy. That's too hard, I can't do that. But in the end, it turns out to be nectar when you go back home, back to Godhead. Therefore, one has to use that intelligence to be able, the intelligence involves the power of discrimination, that one can see what is good and what is bad. So when the intelligence is purified, then one can understand to do the proper things in Krishna consciousness and eschew the non-Krishna conscious activities. All right, so we stop there. Questions, comments, realization. Okay, then everyone has to surrender now. All right, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.